All right. Good evening, everyone. And it's a great pleasure to have a distinguished panel today for our grand rounds that's going to center on how we perform clinical trials, how to be grant funded, and how to be able to carry them out within the organization capability that has been embraced within the New Jersey Alliance for Clinical and Translational Science from the CTO office. Before we get started with our talk, I'm just going to remind on some of the customary items. So you have the grant rounds on the website at the Division of Cardiovascular Diseases. And for getting the CME credit for the session, please text 12460 to the number 888-816-4893 as an SMS message, and you would need to have an active profile in the Rutgers Cloud CME, and your mobile number should match with the one that is registered in the Cloud CME website. And you have 12 hours after the panel ends to continue to get your CME. You also have an ability to get the maintenance of certification, and this is especially for physicians, and they would need to complete the step one, that is to get the CME, and then visit a link, and this link will be made available to you on the chat browser as well. And just remember that the room code for entering into this Q&A quiz session would be future12. And if you have a correct answer that matches the answer that is provided, you will be getting your MOC points directly going into your ABIM website. And it's necessary that your ABIM ID is maintained within the Cloud CME profile. With that, let's get started with today's session. And it's my distinct privilege to introduce the speaker for today's grand rounds is Dr. Ray Panettieri. Dr. Panettieri is the Vice Chancellor for the Translational Medicines and Science at Rutgers Biomedical Health Sciences. And he has been here for the last almost about 7 years. I didn't realize, Ray, that you've been here for such a long time. He's also the director of the Rutgers Institute for Translational Medicines and Science, and he's a Chancellor Scholar. And also I realized today after reviewing his CV that he's the section chief of the allergy and asthma within the Division of Pulmonary and Critical Care in the Department of Medicine at Robert Wood Johnson Medical School. Previous to this, he obtained most of his education and medical degree at University of Pennsylvania, where he really performed some of the most foundational work in the field. He became associate professor with tenure in 1996 and subsequently rose to become the Robert L. Mayock and David A. Cooper professor with tenure. And currently he's emeritus professor with the University of Pennsylvania. He also served his role as the director for the Airway Biology Initiative and subsequently had several leadership roles in asthma program at the Pulmonary and the Allergy Critical Care Division at University of Pennsylvania. His CV is 85 pages long, so it's tough to summarize. He has got such outstanding and distinguished contributions. Most importantly, I think his role in his national societies and committees in NIH and NHLBI, American Thoracic Society, and American Lung Association almost make him a role model for a junior faculty to emulate. It's an outstanding compendium. And I think we should be extremely thankful that he's here with us. He has almost 2 pages worth role as serving his roles as a reviewer in grant committees, editorial boards, and journal reviewers, and hospital and school committees. With a outstanding mentorship record, and monumental teaching and scholarship activities. Most importantly, I was very pleased to see his contributions to the New Jersey Alliance for Clinical and Translational Science, where he has been currently active as a PI in 7 NIH NHLBI multi-million-dollar funded grants that have come to Rutgers. And he has contributed over 400 peer-reviewed publications and book chapters, and his work is really outstanding. And today he's really going to stimulate us on how we can do clinical research and clinical trials, and the chemistry that he has brought together and the service that he's providing from his office is going to be very important for emergence of cardiology and many other such divisions at Rutgers. So with no further delay, Ray, please take us over on some of your outstanding contributions.
Patho, I wish my parents were still alive to hear that. That's incredible. Thank you so much for the nice and kind words. So my goal today is really to talk about, and this is exciting to me, the service that we provide, the service that we provide to Rutgers. And that service is under the auspices of the New Jersey Alliance for Clinical and Translational Science, NJACS. We are fortunate to have been awarded this grant on our second try. We are the only CTSA hub in New Jersey. And there is, I'm going to be unabashed in my advertising. Okay, so this is a commercial. There is the website. You can find everything I'm going to talk about on the website. Joining me today is Nancy Riley. She's just a wonderful expert in clinical trials administration, and she is the executive director for the Clinical Trials Office. So with no further ado, let's talk about NJACS. These are my disclosures. None of these will impact on this talk. The objectives today are really to talk about and identify the value of a CTSA hub. What does it mean to you? Define precision medicine and characterize the heterogeneity of disease states and the heterogeneity of response to therapy. And we heard about this in your last grand rounds when we had a visiting professor. We're going to describe why Encore Clinical Trial Management System can interface with EPIC and Deep-6, our AI, that is artificial intelligence cohort builder, and why it can improve clinical trial execution. This is transformative for Rutgers. Before we had any of these tools, we were squarely a C- in the eyes of big pharma in doing clinical trials. I can tell you, we're now probably ranked B+. We're not an A yet, but we're heading there quickly. Whoops. So the agenda is to talk about the CTSA briefly and then really drill down into what does the CTSA do for you as a cardiologist. What is the Clinical Trial Office? Talk about Encore Clinical Trials Management System and its interface with EPIC, and the Deep-6 AI Machine Learning Cohort Builder. We'll talk about our Scientific Review Board and the Regulatory Support Team. All right, so these are your questions. One of these are true. Precision medicine assures a patient will respond to therapy. CTMS, that is a clinical trials management system, is a tool for IRB approval. CTSA Hub have no training programs, and Rutgers is a member of the CTSA consortium. So there's only one true answer. So vote your conscience, and I'll come back to this at the end of my talk. So what is the CTSA? It is the largest infrastructure and training award given by NIH. Matter of fact, it is administered by its own institute, INCATS. It has 5 goals, to train and cultivate translational science workforce. And that is from undergraduates right on to postdocs, on to senior mentors. Engage communities and patients, integrate special and underserved populations in clinical translational science. I use that abbreviation, CTS, frequently, and that's across the lifespan, from birth right on to death. Increase the quality and efficiency of clinical translational science research, especially multi-centered, multi-site trials, and advance the use of cutting-edge informatics. So what is translational science? It has nothing to do with linguistics. It takes basic research and translate it into humans, into patients, into practice, and into the community. So think of it this way. It's discovery to practice to policy. That is, for the most part, the entire continuum of translational science. Now, let me give you another imagery. It's the imagery of a pharmaceutical company. So we speak of T0 through T4. Each of these columns represent a silo of translation. T0 is wet lab research. It may not only be wet lab, right? It could be software. It could be device. That's discovery in a pharmaceutical firm. T1 is translation into humans. Think of it as phase 1 clinical trials, proof of safety. T2 is translation to patients. That's phase 2 and 3, sort of proof of concept. T3 is translation into practice. Phase 4, or clinical outcomes research, that's proof of efficacy. And then T4 is really translation to the community. We're thinking about population-based outcomes, proof of acceptance. Now the skill set of each of those columns are unique. Some skills are going to be clear. Pipetting in T0 is important, but the manipulation of linked databases is really T4. So we have components in our CTSA Hub, which is by prescription what the CTSA consortium wishes, in each of these columns, and we'll explore those. Again, service is what the CTSA Hub is about. It's not about hypothesis testing. It's not, it can be about hypothesis generating, but it's service to the community. Now, when we talk about the outcome, what is the widget at the end of this? What's the special sauce? Well, academic assets for commercialization is certainly one outcome that we love to see. And that could be devices, diagnostics, and software. It's not simply pills. It's not simply inhalers. I'm a pulmonologist, so I'm going to go there. But bottom line, it could be any of those innovations. And the commercialization is our hope as a scientist, clinical or translational scientist, to improve the care of individuals. So let's talk about our theme. Our theme is shown in this column. It is the heterogeneity in disease and response to therapy. What does that mean? Well, as cardiologists, you know, if you're on rounds and a medical student says the patient has congestive heart failure, that's not an adequate term, right? It encompasses a global phenomenon of congestive heart failure. It could be ischemic cardiomyopathy, it could be valvular disease, it could be a whole variety of adjectives after congestive heart failure. So CHF, asthma, COPD, they're heterogeneous diseases. Now, let's say I develop a new widget and I use that as a diagnostic test, and I can refine a subset of congestive heart failure, asthma, and COPD, and subtype A, maybe it's eosinophilic driven asthma and airway inflammation, can be identified and treated adequately. Well, in an iterative manner, B and C now goes back up and new diagnostic tools are developed. Now, even if I develop a targeted therapy, what's fascinating to me is there's a heterogeneity in response to therapy. That means if I have hypertension, some patients respond to a beta blocker where others respond to an ACE inhibitor, an ARB. So there's heterogeneity in the response. Some of that is also determined by social determinants and the environment. Race and ethnicity play critical roles. Ultimately, our new targeted therapy, be it at the bench or in silico, develops into clinical research outcomes, safety, and cost, and that can affect clinical guidelines. But guess what? Even if I go perfectly through this cartoon, at the end of the day, it has to be adopted by payers, and patients need to be willing to take the therapy or use the diagnostic, and health systems have to agree to do it. So there are many exits on this highway to go to failure, and they all have to align. Amazingly, we actually ever get new drugs approved because precision medicine is really the identification of the heterogeneity of disease and the heterogeneity in response to therapy overlaid by environmental social determinants of health. Now, there is some extraordinary successes in precision medicine. I'm not going to go through all of these, but you can see the medical field on the left side, and we can talk about cardiovascular disease and the disease, coronary artery disease. Biomarkers exist that could predict actually the response to Plavix. In a similar manner, there's pharmacogenomics that can determine whether one is more likely with an intervention to undergo smoking cessation with the intervention shown on the right side. The whole point here is the predictability of therapeutic response given the right diagnosis. Now, if we had the world of precision medicine, I would say we're less than 1% adequate in determining the use of precision medicine because we just don't have all the information we need. So the theme of our NJX is to develop an approach that can identify the heterogeneity of response to disease and its therapy. What we want is the right diagnosis for the right patient at the right therapy at the right time. And time actually matters, right? If we look at the lifespan, people respond differently, determined by their age. So it really determined, the context is very important with regard to response. So let's get back to who is NJX. Well, the Alliance is just that. We are across all of New Jersey, and we have aligned with Princeton and NJIT. Rutgers is the home of NJX, but our partners in the Alliance is Princeton and NJIT. We also have partners in industry and in government that has helped shape our approach. It's based in the Rutgers Institute for Translational Medicine and Science. That is the center to which I direct. This is an institute that reports directly to Brian Strom. Our hub has 14 cores. That's termed the UL1 component. We have 2 training cores. We have a Career Development Award, a KL2 that provides 2 years of funding, very similar to a K23 in funding, 75% of the NIH cap plus $25,000 in laboratory expenses. And we have both a graduate student and postdoctoral program under the umbrella of the TL1. The TL1 is optional. We were fortunate enough to secure the graduate program, postdoc program. So we have 14 cores and training grants. I'm going to get into a little more detail about some of these. So here in a graphic in cartoon form is all the bubbles with all the schools. It touches virtually every school and institute, as well as Princeton and NJIT. This alliance forms NJX. Now, I have been really pleased and dumbfounded by the enormous expertise and intellect of our leads and co-leads of the core. And those are all shown here. Mark Einstein is my associate director, OB-GYN chair at Newark at NJMS. But many of these faces you recognize as playing similar roles in administering the cores. Each core has 2 co-leads, sometimes 3, depending on the depth and breadth of the core. We have leads from Princeton and NJIT, as you can see. So what is our structure? Well, we have an administrative core that lives in our institute. We have informatics that's headed up by Bar von Essen, as well as David Ferran and Frank Sonnenberg and Yi Chen from NJIT. Very important platform, which touches on all of these other combined core. We have a community engagement core that has no fewer than 50 community-based organizations that are alliance members that we have utilized in numerous activities. Shauna Hudson and Altalia runs that. We have a team science core and a badge that is micro-credentialing in team science. That course is actually going on this semester. Translational endeavors, a workforce core whose job is to administer the Clinical Translational Masters in Science Award. We also have certificate programs as well as micro-credentialing. We have a very, very active pilot grant. The last 3 years, we're just started our 4th of 5-year grant. We give out $640,000 a year in pilot grants. Now, the pilot grants are unique in that you need to have a partner from one of the alliance members. What we're trying to do is build collaboration and team science. So Rutgers and Princeton investigator joins together and write these pilot studies. Go to the website, we have definite categories for these, but very helpful. What about your biostatistics and epi needs? We have BERG, which is our biomedical epidemiology and statistics program and protocol design. This is in the School of Public Health. Takes consultations, a very strong core with tremendous numbers of seminars, all of which are recorded and you can access. MANCOVA, ACOVA, adaptive design approaches. We have a regulatory support group who will help marshal your clinical trial, be it funded by pharma or investigator initiated through the regulatory process. I'll come back to that. We have a research capacity enhancement core. This utilizes big data from special populations core, as well as our network capacity. I'm going to talk about that. This is really the basis of our clinical trials office. We have 2 innovative cores. One in machine learning, which is based in artificial intelligence, based at Princeton, who does consultations with the needs of AI and machine learning. Biomarker core that could actually develop soluble tests on blood or urine, help navigate your study. These are our innovative cores, and our training, we already talked about T and K. So we have a comprehensive platform that's now been in effect for the last 3 years. Just summarizing, the informatics core has developed a clinical research data warehouse, which will incorporate all of the EMR. Some of these are legacy from the old Centricity as we went to Epic, but will be across all of the Barnabas Health System. Again, Frank Sonnenberg, Bar von Essen, and David Ferran are the co-leads there. Our community engagement, very active, as I mentioned, developed a network of networks that can reach out for vulnerable populations and underrepresented groups in a way that we could tap into these groups to improve healthcare and social determinants of health. Team science, Bijou and Ralph have done a marvelous job in workshops, have a course and a micro-credentialing badge program that will build multiple disciplinary team science approaches. We have workforce, some of this based in structured learning, other experiential learning. This is our certificate and master's program. We also have a very active research coordination group that can help provide the research coordination for your studies. Pilot grants we mentioned, and our biostats, epi, and research design BIRD core offers free consultations and offers you a biostatistician for your grants as line items in your grants to provide the necessary statistical analyses you wish to have. Again, this is an advertisement. Here we are. This is our website. Please reach out, tap into the website. You can find all the details that I cover here. So what does NJX mean to you? Well, it's pilot funding, substantial, $640,000 in multiple categories, availability of new tools for research, easy access to the EMR through a clinical research data warehouse, access to participant populations through community and special populations. One of the most unique populations we study are incarcerated New Jerseyans. That is University Health takes care of all 28,000 inmates with a rich database that can be accessed. Training for students, staff, faculty in clinical and translational science for junior faculty, the equivalent of a 2-year K award as they improve their application for a K08 or a K23. Much improved efficacy going through RUG committees and helping you navigate through the hospital systems for your approval. And we have access to exclusive grants to CTSA members. These are FOAs that only come to NCATS to work with other CTSA hubs. We are one of 60, the only one in New Jersey. There's one in all of Philadelphia. There's one in Hershey, one in Pittsburgh. There's 4 in Manhattan. So we are privileged to be the only CTSA hub in New Jersey. So let me tell you a little bit about the clinical trials office, because if you're thinking of doing a clinical trial, we can be very helpful. Our goal here is to improve the efficiency of startup processes through centralization. That means we can assess feasibility, contracting, budgeting, and partner hospital agreements. We improve the quality of clinical trials conducted at RBHS and ensure the studies are consistent to meet recruitment targets, assure compliant billing. Yes, billing, front and back office. And we do that by using specific platforms. Our scope is really RBHS investigators, excluding CINJ. What I'm talking about here is all of non-oncology. Oncology is managed by CINJ, has a parallel system that's quite effective. We stay in our lanes. We do all of non-oncology, interventional and non-interventional studies, anything that has a billable clinical procedure. We could be helpful in navigating that. And studies are conducted at Rutgers or other affiliated hospitals across all of the RWJ Barnabas Health System. In a cartoon, this is what the Clinical Trials Office does. It's actually quite unique because at other AMCs, academic medical centers, these activities are broken off and are disjointed and siloed. So we have 5 clinical research units. These clinical research units are staffed by expert research coordinators, budget and finance groups who can put together budgets. Not only is there 2 in New Brunswick, the adult and pediatrics, but there's one at Yoshi in Piscataway that focuses on occupational and environmental exposures. We have one at the dental school for dental health, and we have one in Newark. Again, these are predominantly non-oncology and well-staffed, cross-trained. Our business office can do centralized budgeting and contracting. We have our own finance group that can help you put together your budgets. We administer the CLIN card for all of our BHS. We also have our own lawyer. Our counsel works closely with central administration. We do all the CDAs for our BHS now. You probably didn't even know that, but we do it. If there are any issues with that, we can solve them quickly. Why? Because all of these activities are under one umbrella. One umbrella, the Clinical Trials Office. The support for this comes from the Chancellor's Office and is administered through our institute, the Ritz. The important point here is there's one mantra: first patient, first visit. That is the goal. Years ago, we were 6 months before we could stand up a clinical trial. By that time, pharma moved on, the study closed. We have a desire to stand up a study in 8 to 10 weeks. In the private sector, 7 weeks is the average. So I'm talking about an AMC that can almost reach that of a private practitioner's office. But more important than that, we can do a feasibility review. Deep 6 can read our EMRs for structured and unstructured data. Yes, claims data. That's like Slicer and Dicer and Epic. That's sort of old school. Our program can read your note and find inclusion exclusion criteria using a very sophisticated glossary and dictionary and AI, and can match a patient to unstructured data. Why is that important? Well, if you get tapped to do a clinical trial, you want to know how many patients you have. Well, we can do this assay or this assessment within minutes across 850,000 records in New Brunswick alone. That will certainly get larger as we go across all of RWJ Barnabas. Regulatory affairs, we have a scientific review board I'll mention and a regulatory support team. OnCore. OnCore is a platform, you may be familiar with it at CINJ. They were the beta test site for that 15 years ago. We have now taken that and gone enterprise-wide, which means non-oncology has access for this. It is a soup to nuts platform for clinical trial management. You can set up in OnCore when a patient will arrive, emails go out or phone calls to remind the patient. We track coordinator time, effort, and utilization. So we can maximize our research coordination with our demand. It is soup to nuts, tracks workflows, improves efficiency, and the return on investment it can follow whether bills went out and whether bills come back in. The reporting has visibility in a clinical trial portfolio, and it assures clinical research billing compliance. So the old school approach, you had your own finance office putting together a budget. That's passe, because when you do that with a sponsor, it registers, and then when that sponsor does another study, they pull up the budget that you gave them. If you are under billing, then the next study done at Rutgers, that study comes up and they say, well, we paid this before. We have tried to use charge masters that could normalize our charges. We left way too much money on the table doing clinical trial research. We could improve on that. So we piloted this outside of CINJ at a great time, February of 2021, in the midst of a pandemic. But the good news is we were successful. We're rolling this out simultaneous with Epic. As Epic goes live, our clinical trial management system will go arm in arm. We have Epic and OnCore experts in the implementation team, so that as we go live through each of these steps, we will have established the CTMS. So this is seamless. Deep 6. What a fabulous tool. It's live now at Robert Wood Johnson Medical Center, soon to be live in Newark. It's being utilized at CINJ. It took legacy centricity in area EMRs, but it's going to be built out in Epic. Interfaces with the Barnabas Epic currently, interfaces with the Epic University Hospital, and it enables us to do a feasibility review of clinical trials. IRB approved studies can list potential eligible subjects generated. That list gets generated, providers can be notified, and then patients could be notified by the clinician to be incorporated into the study. The important point here is within minutes, we scan 800,000 records. We know what our denominator is, and we could then decide whether you choose or not choose to do the study given our patient mix. The Scientific Review Board was born out of experiences at CINJ. All studies go through a scientific review board. We didn't want this to be an impediment. What we want to do is build in an educational moment for postdoctoral fellows, cardiology fellows, graduate students who want to get feedback on how to maximize their IRB and improve their IRB submission. So the Scientific Review Board has 20, count them, 20 faculty who serve on this. They get salary to be doing this. They evaluate IRB protocols that are submitted to them. They give feedback to either the trainee or the faculty member, so that by the time the review board has intervened, the application then goes to the Rutgers IRB. We are not an IRB, but I can tell you the time in the IRB goes swiftly because we actually have IRB members who sit on the review board. So the point here is we can make your application better going to the IRB. We also can track the accrual rates and suggest remediation if you're falling behind in your recruitment schedule. The office is staffed by 2 incredibly successful coordinators. There's a quality assurance manager, Anthony Gonzalez. Farah Anwar was an IRB coordinator here at Rutgers. She's our regulatory affairs manager. They're doing consultations every day, day in and day out. All you need to do is email them at this email. They can help problem solve, but moreover, they can help with IACOC and institutional biosafety, data sharing agreements, material transfer. We offer a soup to the nuts consultation for regulatory affairs. That's all based in the clinical trials office. So is it successful, Panettieri? It sounds too good to be true. Who's paying for this? Well, we're paying in a way by building a return on investment. Chancellor Strom footed the bill. This bill is coming back and is now being paid by our success in clinical trials. Remember what I said, we were a C- in the eyes of pharma. We're now about a B+. Just to show you some of our successes, at the onset of the pandemic, we had only 1 patient in New Jersey identified. At that point, we decided to build a healthcare worker cohort to track COVID infections in vulnerable populations, that is, our healthcare workers. We recruited over 5,200 participants in 90 days and have now followed them for 3 years for their infectivity in the natural history, moving through vaccinations. We had several NIH grants that we were fortunate to obtain. We've amassed over 27,000 biospecimens. We established a community-based approach to COVID-19 testing in underrepresented populations. Shauna Hudson's done a beautiful job in this study, comparing the value of community-based organization and enhancing testing through Radix Up. This was an NIH grant. We recruited over 2,500 participants in this study. Our specimens were the ones that RUCDR used, now called Infinity Biologics, to establish the emergency utilization authorization of the first ever global COVID-19 saliva test. It was our samples. We're very proud of that. We were sites for Moderna, Pfizer, and J&J. Matter of fact, for J&J, we recruited over 840 patients within 6 weeks to undergo the vaccination, the J&J vaccine trial. We were third globally in recruitment. The paper was published in the New England Journal, but the third, I mean, we were second, pardon me, second global. The third was Columbia. Now, not Columbia University, the entire country of Columbia. We recruited more than the entire country of Columbia, which was third globally in their recruitment for the J&J trial. We've now moved on to establish 3 decentralized interventional trials in COVID, which means we recruit and administer an interventional trial without ever meeting the patient. This is all done through Zoom, regional pharmacies, tracking blood and biospecimens, all being done in a decentralized manner. I know this is near and dear to Patho's heart because we intend to do echoes in the wild and be able to gather that data in a rich manner so that we can reach underrepresented populations that struggle to come into CRUs, clinical research units, during working hours. We were part of the Active 1 and Active 2 sites at NIH and 18 other COVID-19 trials. So I am pleased to report some of our external advisory board reviews. There was consensus that NJX made immense and impressive strides after 3 years, has been amassing a level of has been amazing level of productivity, and a level of achievement by this time is outstanding, and the ultimate potential to be one of the exemplar CTSAs in the US. Now, can't do this possibly with 1, 2, or 3 persons. It takes a village to do this, and that photo that I showed you of all the co-leads. We try to do everything in a transparent manner. We want to be successful in our renewal. We're in the process of writing that. 5 years comes up very quickly. I look forward to working closely with all of cardiology, everyone on this call, and your colleagues across RWJBH. I think we could be a stellar cardiology group focused on state-of-the-art clinical trials, both interventional, observational. You already have a legacy of that. The Costis has done a beautiful job in that manner. We want to expand and amplify that into interventional trials so that we are the #1 interventional study cardiology division in the Mid-Atlantic. Here are the content questions. There's only one true. Precision medicine assures a patient will respond to therapy. CTMS is a tool for IRB approval. CTSA hubs have new training programs. And Rutgers is a member of the CTSA consortium. Having played Division I baseball many, many years ago, I could tell you this is a hanging curveball, which you should knock over the fence. I want to thank everyone on this call for hanging in there in the late afternoon. I want to thank Dr. Sengupta for this wonderful opportunity, Navina, to be on the panel. My colleague, Nancy Riley, who is on this call, is happy to correct anything that I embellished, which I know she will. Thank you so much. I much appreciate it.
Thank you very much, Ray. That was an outstanding overview. I'm really stimulated by the levels of opportunity. If you would like to just, we would like to bring you in the focus mode, and we'll bring in all 4 of us. Let's see. Let's bring in all. Joseph, is this possible for us to be brought together in a focus mode, 4 of us? And you know, Ray, I want to be pragmatic let me give you my division. My division is comprised of, I would say, 70 to 80% who are clinically focused, who have 90% or 80% time carved for clinical activities. Some of them are clinician educators. In fact, everybody's a clinician educator mostly. And they have a record of doing several abstracts, and typically they write papers. Some of them write really good amount of papers. We don't have a strong track records of grants and clinical trials, and part of that is because of the support. And I want to ask, as much as it almost the information that you presented is too appetizing, but there are too many choices. So I want to carve out with some examples. So let's say somebody is extremely busy clinically, is interested, is young, 3 or 4 years at assistant professor level, now has a change of heart listening to your presentation. I wish I could apply for some grants. I wish I have something going on which is more robust. I wish my academic career was something more than what I have up till now. How could we give a fresh start to some of our people? And I'm talking in terms of, I think, I know that there's a combination of mentorship, and lots of people talk about protected time, but I recognize that there is nothing like a protected time. Even if I write something, you really have to have the energy and the push to get going and moving towards. So carve out of 1 or 2 ways in which we could, let's say, could we apply for some of those grants, maybe to get some grants, or of course the clinical trials. Let's start with the grants, then we can come to the clinical trials section. That is also important.
Yeah, so I think the best way to be an effective investigator, if that's what somebody wants to do, and let's say they have a change of life, an aha moment, I think those individuals could still develop a research, a robust research program. It depends on what they want to do and how much fire in the belly they have. I think to be a truly effective NIH-funded investigator, it's going to take some training. You know, what I've suggested to people, if you're interested in clinical research, then the one way to move in that direction is to get a master's in clinical translational medicine. That master's can be done in a prolonged way so that you don't have to stop practice to do it. On the other hand, what it does give you is the skill set to be able to play in the sandbox to get your own grants. Because when I did research, and we all know this, we're effectively a small business. You have to fund your activity. Not only do you have to fund your activity, but you have to fund the assembly line. You have to fund the people who are putting the widgets together, or doing the pipetting, or doing your data collection. I don't want to scare anyone away. I think if you have the desire and the need, there are plenty of ways that you could get into research. I mean, the first thing I look at is, what have you done? What have you published? A lot of people will publish as they go through their career, maybe case studies, things of that sort, but there's something that really tweak their interest. The next step is mentorship. Patha, there's no substitute, right, for a mentor. Now, you don't need just one mentor. Actually, you need a village. Because frankly, as I went through my career, I had multiple mentors. I had a disease state mentor. I had a discipline mentor. I mean, I had somebody in the pulmonary division who wanted to look over my career development, making sure that my clinical activity aligned with my research. Then I had a fundamental mentor because I was working at a wet bench. This was somebody who helped me with molecular biology. And then I had another mentor who was a senior gray-haired physician scientist that became my mentor for my K award. So I had 3 mentors. And I think it takes a village to train a physician scientist to be a researcher. and to be a good researcher. But that, there's so many aspects to medicine. You can be a very astute cohort builder. In cardiology, I can imagine a junior investigator teaming up with a fundamental scientist who builds a cohort where you're doing sampling in your office, or you're having colleagues get patients, certain types of patients, you're curating the biospecimens. We could be helpful in doing some of that in building cohorts. And that then becomes your cohort of study. There is nothing better to a fundamental scientist than well-curated biospecimens from deeply phenotyped patients. Guess who phenotypes patients? Physicians. So we need physicians. So you can participate at numbers of levels. And I think that's what I would love to see people do. And even if you're very clinically oriented, when I first came here, I had 3 pulmonary fellows who were interested in research and never picked up a pipette man. 2 of them wrote papers. And they were doing it part-time because there was no T32, there was no institutional training grant. So the point is, with the right environment and the right platform, you can be very successful.
Great. So Ray, so let me again try to rephrase. So you did mention some pilot funding opportunities, and I think those are there on site. And then you mentioned about some K awards. How difficult are these to get? And let's say if we are extremely interested, as you would know, with the cardiologist's vision right now on heterogeneity and using unsupervised machine learning techniques. These are some of the areas that Navina and others we can help. Is there a way we can put forth some applications, and what would be the likelihood of such can be treated well?
Yeah, Sally Radovic and actually Fred Wondersford and Vantner they co-lead actually that group. I would say that probably 75% of the grants are clinically based. They're not wet lab research. So the potential for a very well-written grant to get supported is there. I think you just need to build the right mentorship, and you can reach out to Sally. I'm sure she wouldn't mind sending you a grant that's redacted just to see what it looks like. Does everyone get a grant? No. But I can tell you we're a whole lot more likely to fund it than NIH at this point. We're probably in the percentile of 30%. But, even the K23s and K08s that are out there, if you're a physician scientist, the success rate is stellar, so much better. No one gets it on the first go, but if you rewrite it and you're compliant with the reviewers, the likelihood of getting funding is 30–35%. Remember what that is. That's 5 years of funding at 75% of your effort, as well as monies towards your research. So that gives you the platform to get more training, be it through a master's or whatever. But I think, with the right mentorship, people will be successful. I know we had no Ks before I got here. We had 2 Ks now in pulmonary. 1 K08, 1 K23. So it's feasible.
And so could someone who is like in the second or third year of assistant professorship still apply for a K award?
So that's a great question. So Partha, the minimum, you have to be 10 years. You have to be under 10 years from your terminal degree. So
that's a tremendous amount of years that you can try. So I think, and the 30% is a very high likelihood, like the 1 in 3 chances of getting funded. So, and I also wanted to tell everyone, so being on the K, I've recognized that for interventional cardiologists, they allow 50%, up to 50%. I mean, so it's not necessary that you have to have 75% protected time. You can almost go for 50%, and that's allowed. Okay, so I think we should definitely investigate that a little bit more. Now let's come to the clinical trials. And I think maybe Nancy and Navina can discuss. I think Navina and both of you have been working through several clinical trials currently that are happening in cardiology. And what's the process been? And could you give us an overview of how you have navigated through the budget? What's the process been, and how seamlessly it works? And maybe we can have some questions then coming after that.
Sure.
So maybe Navina, can you start? So I know that most of the time the investigators have approached you, and then I think you connect to Nancy. How does it work? What happens?
So right now, Dr. Sengupta, when we came in on July 1st, I was told that, even for clinical trials, or even for that matter, NIH grants previously submitted by our faculty as co-investigator did not account for their time on the grant. Right? Proper allocation of funding was a major issue. And then our faculty had the impression that, oh, I'm participating in this study as a co-investigator, so I should have 3% protected time. In fact, nobody told them that they have to input that as a budget in the budget by the co-investigators. So that was one of the issues. So I act as a buffer between our faculty and CTO office, Nancy Riley. And this is how it happens. So I meet with our faculty to decide upon the budget. In addition to that, I also incorporate correct allocation of resources, as well as the time spent by the physician, as well as our research team in providing the services. Then it goes to Nancy Riley's office, actually not Nancy in particular, Joy London, who works on our budget negotiations. So once we have a clear indication where the faculty is happy, research coordinator time is allocated for, and I actually look for the resources being spent. And you know that we don't have a clinical research unit or a clinical research center. We are planning to use CRC as our surrogate or a hybrid model for our approach for the division, at least temporarily. So I also account for the facility fee of the usage. Once I incorporate that, then I tell Joy, this is what is feasible for us. Could you negotiate? Then Joy London actually communicates with the sponsor. And back and forth, there are often times where the sponsor comes back and say, oh, we will not pay for this. So I know that Deep6 AI is a very nice tool which I personally loved when I heard about it, and which looks at the feasibility of the study, which tells that, do we have the patients that we serve? Would the patients benefit from this intervention? Would this be a successful clinical trial? So we are asking the questions ahead of time before even recruiting the patients, which means that we are doing good science. In my, in my background, I can say that. So there is a digital fee that we have to pay for Deep6 AI. Of course, nothing comes free of service. So often sponsors raised questions, and then we clarified saying that it's up to you. If you don't want to use it, then we would not guarantee success of the trial. So that's how we negotiate. And this is how the process has been for the clinical trials for funding. Nancy, I hope I stated that correctly.
You did. Just to make one point, though, is that the feasibility, so we can use Deep6 in two ways. The first is a de-identified feasibility assessment. That's for free. That's really, once we have the system fully operational and integrated with the Barnabas Epic network, as well as University Hospital Newark Epic, what we're going to do is this is just going to be our standard operating procedure. When somebody has a clinical trial that they're proposing to do, we're going to do this very brief feasibility assessment that focuses on whether we do indeed have the subject population or not. And we've successfully talked out a few investigators, talked them out of conducting a trial that really wouldn't have gone anywhere. So, it's definitely for, the limited use that we have, right now, it's been very successful. But we're really looking forward to, within a couple of months, we're going to have access to the entire network. So it'll be an extremely powerful tool.
Yeah, I'll give you an example. I was tapped to do a study because a key opinion leader in asthma, they wanted to place it at Rutgers, and it was an eosinophilic asthma trial and severe uncontrolled asthma with very high eosinophils. So we ran that study through our feasibility. They called me and they said, well, how many patients you have? And we were running it while they were asking. I came out with a demographics table of some 400 patients that qualified. Not only that, I could tell them the gender and the aggregate age of all the patients in real time. You know how powerful that is when you've ever done a clinical trial and you get a sheet and you have to fill it out and you're just guessing? I could give them an entire demographics table of the people that we have in our EMR. So I think the point here is that this is a tool that doesn't cost anything. Where there's money is if we need to build the cohort so that you have to contact the patient, and that does require IRB approval. So that's where then we built the cohort. There's a charge for that. We tried to get the cost of this returned up front in some of the budget negotiations as you've done. But we have typically been able to get much more money than the individual centers doing it because we know what to bear and what we call some things. If you use the wrong term as a line item, it's knocked out immediately in the budget by the sponsor. So it's almost 20 questions. You have to guess the right question, guess the right answer, and you get a yes. It's frustrating, but that's the way you do business. And so we're on your side there. We want no investigator left behind.
So Dr. Panettieri, I actually have one more question about biomarker discovery, right? So I come from integrative systems biology background, and genotype to phenotype mapping is one of the hard science that I would like to do research one day if possible. So I was wondering about the course that you have mentioned. Let's say some of our faculty are actually interested in doing some omics studies, however, do not have resources and the funding to do that. Would the course support such studies by doing a collaborative research?
Yeah. I think there's several ways to go with that. There's informatics. The informatics group has genomics and epigenomics, and they could be helpful. The BIRD, biostatistics group, BERD, could also get you in contact with other geneticists. There's a very rich database with Carlos Patu, P-A-T-U. He's a psychological geneticist and is doing wonderful things with underrepresented minority groups. So the point is, we could get you in contact with the right people. And, and then using some of the resources of CTSA and platform, we could be helpful in giving you ideas about REDCap databases. How do you do that? Because we have many courses on that.
Yeah. So my next question is on the same lines. Biomarkers for us means something, right? Like they are genes, proteins. Of course, you have presented the plethora of both radiographic, molecular biomarkers and protein biomarkers for monitoring purposes, prognostic and diagnostic value. However, in cardiology, when we look into biomarker discovery, and we often our faculty work with biosignals and bioimages or imaging, would you actually consider like radiomics related biomarkers or signal derived biomarkers?
So that's a really interesting question, because we usually think of soluble mediators in blood or tissue and things like that. But what you're talking about is a different process. Now, the person who is most knowledgeable in that is David Ferran. And he is doing a tremendous amount of work in cancer, not only by using radiography, right, or other imaging modalities. He's also imaging tissue and looking at the images of pathology and trying to characterize diagnosis. So my suggestion to you is reach out to David Ferran. He's now moved into a different role over the medical informatics that will bridge the health system and CINJ and NJX, since he's a co-lead in the informatics group. Highly recommend chatting with him. Tell him I sent him your way. And I think he's fascinated in just what you're talking about, using imaging as a biomarker of predictive therapeutic response.
And let's say if we have grants that we submit, our faculty submit for NJX pilot funding, would there be a chance to get funded through this type of biomarker discovery?
Yeah, I think it depends on, he's had a grant recently funded in collaboration with Princeton. So I definitely think it's feasible.
Thank you.
Very good. So there's a question from Dr. Akabu, and he writes, the potential of a data warehouse that is accessible by investigator through application and small grants to cover the cost, etc., is exciting. What is the anticipated time frame for this integrated data warehouse and the vision of how investigators could access it? I think this is a double-edged question. I think we can ask first to get the answer from Ray, and then maybe also Navina can provide some answer on what she's doing.
Yeah. So we started with the clinical research data warehouse. We are very far along in that process. The data has actually been transferred to the clinical research data warehouse. We're in the midst of formulating the data governance committee. That's already met many, many times. We have a website that will list the charges. These are heavily subsidized charges. So I would say they're really only a percentage of the real cost that's associated with this. The CRDW is with the very large mainframe that Barb von Essen has in the Office for Advanced Research Computing. That's where this is going to be housed. So much of the money to support this is coming from RCM costs across all the chancellors. So it's subsidized that way. So I'm very encouraged, probably by spring, that we will be advertising the utility of this. Protocols, a one-page application will be generated. That'll go to the data governance committee. Thumbs up, then you get the data, you'll be able to access it. The data that resides in there will be de-identified. The tentacles that go in from the user interface could look at the data, use the data. This will all be HIPAA compliant, so there's no issues with loss of identified data. As you can imagine, this is a huge undertaking, especially when you're partnering with an organization whose primary goal is clinical care and the clinical franchise, right? So the data use, the data transfer agreements were quite substantial, but we are well on the way to making that available to everyone. So I would say look out early spring for the access to the clinical research data warehouse, which will have all of the EMRs that have been uploaded to date. Remember, the entire health system, the 2 million people, won't be available until probably, what do you think, Nancy? The end of 2023, early 2024?
It's going to go along with the EPIC rollout timeline. So, and I believe that goes through the end of 2023.
Okay.
And the one more question that I just want to be aware of the time. We're 10 minutes past 6. But the last important question is, as you know, Ray, I'm trying to bring in all the cardiology community close together. I mean, I recognize the amount of work they do. And many of them are working long hours in the hospital scenarios. So what would be your appeal as we try to coalesce the cardiology workforce so that there is a unified vision? And with a newer opportunity for clinically focused university professionals and those kind of classified as assignments, or even if you're an adjunct faculty, how would they be able to participate in either clinical trials? Maybe some of them are already doing, but what do you think would be your suggestion for them to move forward?
Yeah, so I think that's a wonderful question. I want to open this up to anyone out there who's interested in doing research and doing pharma clinical trials. Many of you who are listening are key opinion leaders in one aspect or more than one aspect of cardiology. So pharma wants to engage you, but you're a busy clinician. You don't have the hands to do the work. That's where we could provide the hands, you be the PI, And then we could help you meet your desires of being a researcher. And I think we could easily do it. We never had this infrastructure before. We can provide the infrastructure so that you can realize your dream if you wanted to be, on papers that are national papers because you've recruited so well. Let us help recruit for you, and you can make this happen. Now, I think Patha, what I would recommend is as we broaden this through the whole health system, we're going to need some identified directors of research who could interface with us easily across the whole health system. Because I think there's got to be nodes of activity, and those nodes could actually foster communication easier than us doing one-offs with 40 people at one time. So I think I could help think through that infrastructure. It will dovetail seamlessly with NJX and our CTO, because why hire a research coordinator when your study ends? You have to terminate that individual, or you're always scrambling for effort. Our CRO, our CRU actually cross-trains. So when you have an FMLA individual or there's a vacation, your study doesn't stop. We simply have another coordinator who steps in and continues the work. So I think there's an economy of volume. There's an economy of personnel and people resource that we could really help you with moving forward.
Wonderful. Thank you very much. Thank you, Ray. Thank you, Nancy. Thank you, Navina. This has been wonderful. I think this is going to be very exciting, and really looking forward to continuing this dialogue moving forward. Thank you.
Thank you so much, everyone. So long, colleagues. Have a good evening.
Good evening.